Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Evan Herrman, and in today's episode, we're talking to Rabbi Jeremy Fine about Jewish culture and how the Jewish culture has had its influence within Christianity. And there's a lot of cool things that I have learned throughout the years that have really benefited me. One of the things being Sabbath, that has played a huge important role in my life, as well as the love for other people, taking life seriously as well as death. And then also I get to just talk to Jeremy about some of the amazing accomplishments that he's had in his life and some of the things that we can learn from him in the process and the successes that he's had as well. You're not going to want to miss this episode. Today on the Whole Person podcast, I get to interview Rabbi Jeremy Fine. He has spent the beginning stages of his career making religion accessible to his communities. By solidifying financial stability, organizational structure, and long-term success, Rabbi Fine has grown and made a positive institutional change. He is a long learner and takes time and passion for continually gaining new skills and credentials. Rabbi Fine prides himself on being a program innovator, problem solver, improving organizational systems that maximize long-term engagement. Not only that, but he runs a website that's soon to become a business called The Great Rambino that connects many Jewish athletes in all different sports around the world. Rabbi Jeremy Fine, welcome to the show. How are you?
There you go, but I'm great. It's actually funny you said doctor. So there's a thing about conservative rabbis, which I am. I'm outing myself as a conservative rabbi. We, after 25 years of serving the rabbinate, as a rabbi in a community, you get an honorary doctorate. So eventually, I will never call myself. My father's a real physician. He's a real doctor. But one day you could theoretically have said that, and it will be true.
So what you're saying is I'm just telling the truth in advance.
Exactly. You're a fortune teller. Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, I'm really excited to have you here. Manishma.
Kol b'seder. I don't think we're doing this in Hebrew.
No. What's no? Ken?
Ken is yes. Lo.
Lo. Yeah, lo. So as you can see, I have a little bit of Hebrew in me.
Yeah.
I took about 3 or 4 years in college, 10, 11, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't hardly remember anything. I can quote you the Jewish alphabet and a song. and what I spoke to you is what I remember.
That's good. I mean, it's better than most. It's Hebrew is such a beautiful language. So is Yiddish, which is sort of had a little bit of a hip renaissance recently. I don't speak Yiddish, but I have like phrases that my grandmother used to say to me that it just comes out. I mean, I lived in Israel for 2 years. The joke about Americans who speak Hebrew is that like when you go to Israel, it just starts pouring out. But when you're in America, you like try to avoid it. It's just like a weird. I think that's true of many languages too. But yeah, great job. I think you did well.
Oh, thank you. So all that to say, I got to study the Jewish culture for about 3 or 4 years as I was learning Hebrew and really enjoyed a lot of what I learned. And my passion to understand Jewish culture comes from my personal Christian faith and, the Jewish culture that Jesus came up in and trying to understand it better so I can understand his message in Christianity better. And so just right out of the gate, what are some of the fundamentals of Judaism that a lot of people are unaware of?
That's a good question. I think there's 2 things that Judaism has that gives to the world that are sort of irreplaceable, and I think we do better than all other religions. And those are weddings. Like Jewish weddings are just the best. They're just fun, nonstop, dancing, drinking, but also the ceremony is so intimate. And you'll see like I mean, I go to non-Jewish weddings and they have what's called the chuppah, which is the, you stand under this canopy. That's a Jewish custom. Or you break, if you've ever been to a wedding where they break glass at the end of a wedding. I've seen these at non-Jewish weddings, and my Jewish friends turn to me like, why are they doing that? I'm like, I don't know why Christians do that. I know why Jews do that, right? These are Jewish customs. The other thing is,
why does that happen at a Jewish wedding? I don't know.
Yeah, so the canopy is like a home. So the bride and the groom, or today groom and bride, they will go into the chuppah, the canopy, as a way to say, we're going to start our new home together. We're going to start our new life together. The breaking of the glass, even in Judaism, Jews have not had historically the easiest go of things, and even in our happiest times, we remember those who are less fortunate. Jewish and not. We remember the generations that have been lost, and things shatter sometimes into a million pieces. So that's where that comes from. The other thing is funerals. Jews take death very seriously, and in a way to take life very seriously. I was just actually writing about this. Once I did a former congregant of mine in Minnesota was the former mayor of St. Paul. He was very influential in the Hmong community and also for women's rights. So he really changed the police force in St. Paul to accommodate for women to be able to live that profession, but also helping the Hmong community escape bad conditions and find a place in America. And the Hmong community came out for his funeral. I didn't really know him. He wasn't like a synagogue goer, but he did belong to the synagogue. And so I did his funeral. And after the funeral, the Hmong community came up to me in droves, saying they had never seen such respect paid to an individual. And it wasn't him, it was the rituals at all. How we have these different checkpoints throughout a whole year and even longer than a year, where people can mourn differently. And while we celebrate life, we also know that, like, when someone, a parent, a child, God forbid, is removed from your life, there is an emptiness, there is a hole, and the community is responsible for filling it.
Interesting. This is going to get off of a small political rabbit hole here.
Okay.
One of the things that you said that I knew was the great respect of life and death that the Jewish community has, which is why when so many unintelligent, woke individuals talk about Israel persecuting Palestine or other Middle Eastern countries, I was like, you have no idea how much they value life and death. Like, for any retaliation to happen, there's so many things that happen before. Like, they warn their aggressor they're coming. Like, there's not a lot of surprise attacks from Israel.
Never is. Unless they feel the damage that individual or that group is going to cause, both to Palestinian lives and to Israeli lives, is insurmountable.
Correct.
Yeah, it's true. I actually gave a sermon that went a little viral about 2 months ago. And I think people, I think the media covers it horribly. I've lived in Israel for 2 years. I've met tons of Palestinians. The reason, it's become so politicized, and the situation does not have anything to do with, it doesn't compare to anything in America. I mean, if you just look at a map, and you will in 100 years from now, right? And you'll look at the amount of land that their neighbors have, and we have Rhode Island in comparison to like 2 United States, it's not comparable. No one would be like, let's get rid of Rhode Island. You'd be like, let them do what they're doing. Who cares, right? Like, the safety in which they care for their people is immense, and their allies and neighbors. Israel was the first people in Haiti. They were at Surfside. Israel flew in a group of people like 2 countries came to the aid of America during Surfside when, hundreds of people were buried under rubble.
I
Because
remember.
and we help any way we can in such a small country. And you're starting to see some of that percolate through the Arab world, the UAE and some of these places, normalizing peace and relations, because they really realized for a long time, wait a minute, Israelis are not the bad guys at all. They want to help. They want to share their, and medical advice and their water preservation, which we've become, miracle workers in those areas. It's nothing Israelis would want more than a peaceful Palestinian state. That doesn't come with the destruction of the state of Israel, but they've tried. I mean, they unilaterally left Gaza. Unilaterally. We are not there. That is Hamas. So any bad conditions that are happening, and they're getting hundreds of millions of dollars from around the world to support them, and they're building rockets and tunnels. They're not educating. They're not building water and food. It is sad, and we deeply, all Israelis, all Jews, deeply care for those innocent Palestinians. But they wanted the land, and we gave it to them. I talked about this. I was when Israel pulled out of Gaza, knowing what would happen, but doing it anyways. I was in a hotel. I was visiting Israel at the time, or I was living in Israel, but I was at a hotel for the weekend, and it was filled with displaced Israelis who its own country said, you need to leave and give it to these people. And they did. And now those people are in far worse of condition. Israel's in a worse condition. And no Palestinian or Israelis are safer, because for a multitude of reasons. But I wish the world really understood what's really going on there, and not just in a vacuum of, Israel's the one place in that whole region where you can be gay. Neil Patrick Harris went out there. He goes, no one celebrates Pride as good as the Israelis. I mean, he was true. It's true. I mean, it's crazy. You can be a woman and do whatever you want, accomplish whatever your goals are.
Yeah.
And you can't do that anywhere else in the region. And for some reason, those social values, which we pride ourselves on as Americans, get lost when we look overseas, because historically Jews have been easy to point fingers at. We probably always will be.
Well, and honestly, in my opinion, what it comes down to is being the chosen people of God, and the disdain for that. That's on, like, when I look at this, it's not just natural. I look at the spiritual ramifications of it all. And what we see happening in the natural, I think, is a large part of what's happening spiritually. And so for that reason, I see why it's happening while I don't agree with it. Anyway.
Yeah, chosenness is tricky, right? Because yes, it's a moniker of Jewish people, but I would challenge to say that, first of all, monotheism is what was chosen. If we believe, and whoever believes in a God, let's leave atheists aside, multiple gods, it just didn't win out. Monotheism has, whether it's Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, right? The chosenness is about living the laws of the Torah, right? But Judaism also deeply believes if you're not Jewish, let's say as long as you're monotheistic, right? Islam, you're a Muslim, or you're a Christian, you just have to be good at those and peaceful, and you can still go to what we call Olam Haba, heaven, right? A wonderful place after this, whatever it looks like. I have never been there, so I can't tell you. But we're the only religion that doesn't believe, like, if you do, you can believe what you believe. There's a structure, there's a framework, but you don't have to believe what I believe. You don't, Jews don't proselytize. We only proselytize to our own people, which is another story for another time. But I have no desire to, like, if someone wants to be Jewish, great. I would never, Evan, I would never come to you. I actually don't know your religion, but I would never come to you and say, this is what you need, the path you need to follow. You're on your own spiritual journey, and I respect that. And I think that's one of the glories of Judaism. We're the one like really realistic monotheistic religion. We believe everyone has a place in the world to come.
All right. So going back to that first question, some of the fundamentals of Judaism, you talked about weddings, you talked about burials. In terms of practice, other than those two, what would you say are some pretty important foundational pieces to Judaism?
Yeah, I would start with Shabbat, which is the Sabbath. Begins Friday evening at sundown and goes to Saturday at sundown. In modern times, but also historically, Shabbat has sort of been this pillar. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel famously said that Shabbat is a palace in time where you get to pause. I mean, it's really the antidote to all the things that parents deal with today, right? Don't bring your screens, come as a family, have a little nash, which is Yiddish for a little bit of food, reflect on your week, take your time, slow things down, and think. I remember in college, I had 3 Jewish roommates, but I didn't do homework on Friday night, sent out tells, and they were like, I can't believe this. How do you not do, what if you have papers? And I go, my week is a 6-day week. Your week is 7. So I need time to slow down and process. So Shabbat, the Sabbath, is certainly a pillar. Kashrut, our dietary laws and what we put into our body. And I think that's evolving a little bit more in modernity with veganism and ethical eating and things like, and just like access to food and things like that. So I think that's reshaping a little bit, but it's always been a pillar to think about and be blessed in what comes into your body. We have a whole year of holidays. It's not just Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a fun one, but so Purim, Passover is a big story, which is the Exodus of Egypt. Purim is the story of Esther and Mordechai. What?
Oh, sorry, I said Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah is our New Year. Yom Kippur is sort of a day of atonement. There's others. Those are some of the big ones. And, also what we touched on earlier, the modern state of Israel is a huge piece. Most Jews, regardless of who's the loudest and who's the wokest, overwhelmingly Jews support the state of Israel and a safe space for Jews to practice. It's one of the greatest social democracy experiments in human history. And it's still a baby.
Yeah.
So,
I've always wondered, because, so my background, it's a Judeo-Christian background, and with an evangelical bent, and so
sounds fun.
one of the things that we think about often, and I know at least from reading what we call the Old Testament, talking about sin specifically. And, in the Jewish culture, there was a lot of sacrifices for sin. And then for us in the New Testament, when Jesus died, that was the sin sacrifice for all humanity if we receive that. What is the understanding of sin in Judaism today, I guess, compared to what it was then when there were sacrifices being made? Because I don't think sacrifices are being made today.
No. And it's good that they're not, because I'm a vegetarian. It would really, really cramp my style. Prayer replaced sacrifices. Synagogues replaced the temple. So we come, Jews pray 3 times a day. Not all Jews, but, that's what we're told to do. And 4 times on Sabbath. On Saturday morning, there's an extra prayer, which replaced the sacrifice. So prayer becomes that, and then we have Yom Kippur, which is biblical, but it's a day of atonement. So that's when you apologize to those who you've wronged over the year and things like that. So sin in modern time looks pretty different, right? You don't live in a vacuum. Everyone's not in a ghetto. not everyone just knows each other. There's people have all sorts of ways in which, sin is seen. But ultimately, I think Jews, for the most part, I'll tell you a little story. So I had a non-congregant call me and said to me, like by the way, on my cell phone, did not give him my number. I don't know. Anyways, calls me. I'm walking around Walgreens and he said, Rabbi, I've got a big problem with Judaism. Why can't I just be a good person? Isn't that enough to be a good Jew? And I said, no. And he said, why? I said, being a good person is great. Okay. But it's subjective and it's always changing, right? So what is good, and not within a system. So what's good to me and it might be very different than what's good to you, Evan. I mean,
right.
If we're talking about politics, like that is the heat of the argument in America right now, is like, what is good? And so without a structure, without leaders, without thinkers, we put ourselves in a big problem that we define good very differently, and therefore we behave very differently. And that can be problematic when you live in a collective communal society like America, or like, any democracy in the world. So, sin is not like a huge thing in Judaism anymore, in the sense of like it is biblically. Prayer and repentance has taken that place. And there's still a very strong, very long-lasting structure that maintains us from what societal's constant changing is, from what's right and wrong, and sort of lays out a roadmap. That doesn't mean it doesn't change, but the roadmap is followed and then voted on. Should we build a new road, as opposed to like, I'm just going to walk whichever way I want, right? Which is what this man was saying to me.
Gotcha. So in terms of, well, I guess the reason why I'm hesitating is because I don't want to sound or come off offensive. I'm just going to be who I am and talk. So hopefully you understand my heart.
Let's rock and roll.
Coming from an inquisitive mind. So with Christianity, we believe that, we have forgiveness of our sin because of Jesus, in whom we have salvation. So I guess my question is, from my understanding, even today, Jews are still awaiting for a savior. Am I understanding that correctly? Or a Messiah? I should say Messiah.
Yeah, Messiah. I wouldn't say savior. Yeah, yes and no. Absolutely yes, in the sense that in our tradition there is this messianic, peaceful era that has not come yet. But that is not to put our sins on someone else. That is to relieve the world of its unpeaceful nature. Jews, like, I had a great professor basically said, like, Jews and Christians are the same, right? And he's going through the past, he's going through the history before Jesus Christ, obviously, and he's going. He goes, and then there's this guy named Jesus. You may have heard of him, right? And it just goes like this. But Jews and Christians start the same. We have this, like you said, the Old Testament. We believe in it. Jews don't deny that Jesus existed. Jews believe Jesus. Jews know that Jesus was Jewish. He was probably he was a rabbi, or at that time it was different, but considered a rabbi. Probably had some funky ideas that got a lot of people excited about their lives. And he died. And then 100 years later, this new religion forms based on his principles. All right? Jews don't believe that someone else takes on your sins. You're responsible for your behavior, right? So Jews believe, like, you can't just say, like, on your deathbed, I didn't mean to kill the 27 people that I killed.
Right.
That's on you. You're forgiven by, maybe in the world to come, you're going to have to wrestle with this. Or
so
maybe,
is the rejection of Jesus as Messiah based on the fact that Jews believe that they have to own their own sin versus it being projected onto someone else?
That is a deep part of it. There's no reason to believe for Jews that Jesus was Messiah. We're not in we have not reached a very peaceful point in time. We believe that the Messiah brings upon, ultimate peace. There was nothing, there's been other false messiahs. Not to say that Jesus isn't, obviously he's become some sort of Messiah, savior, but like Shabtai Tzvi claimed that he was this Messiah, and Jews rejected Shabtai Tzvi also. So I don't think Jews believe that Messiah has come. Listen, there are some Jews who have believed in certain people's, like there were Jews who believed that Shabtai Tzvi was the Messiah. There are Jews who believe in certain callings from other rabbis or public figures. I've met these people or met people of their followers, and they seem just like people who had really wonderful messages. I don't think all of Jesus's messages were wrong. I think Jesus wanted a peaceful world. I think Jesus wanted probably more progressive Judaism. But the question always asked is like, which I always have a theological debate with my Christian friends or pastor colleagues, and I say like, but the running joke for me is not just a joke, but it's also the theological experiment. Like, where would Jesus go if he was rebirthed? And they go, he'd go to church. I go, no, he wouldn't. He doesn't know that churches exist. It happened 100 years after his death. He would go to synagogue to find his people, right? That's not a knock on Christianity. People should believe in where makes them spiritual, as long as it's peaceful and you're kind to your fellow neighbor. You should believe in what makes you spiritually connected. But like Jesus himself would go to synagogue. That's what he did. And that's where most Jews, whenever you move to another community, let's say like me, I did it because they pay me to come to the office every day. But what would I do? Let's say I moved to like Lincoln, Nebraska. I would go and try to find the synagogue so that I would have a commonality with the people around me. I think Jesus would do the same thing.
Yeah. Ironically, I've been doing a little bit of studying on that over the past week because I've recently started a ministry, and looking at how Jesus did ministry. Someone posed a question, well, how do you get a whole bunch of unsaved people to an event? And so, my first thing was, well, I'm going to turn to the Bible and see how Jesus modeled it. Well, Jesus never specifically said, hey, let me create this event and have you show up. He went to people, like you were saying, he went to the synagogue. And as I was looking in specifically to the synagogue, again, my perspective is coming from a Judeo-Christian perspective versus a Jewish perspective. And so when I look at that, it's him going to synagogue to show that he's the fulfillment of the law. And I would be assuming in his perspective that if he is the fulfillment of the law, then he's coming to show people who he is versus to just show up and just worship in tradition, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think he shows up for community. Because when you don't know where to go, you seek out people who are like you. I mean, this is also true of like really radical hate groups. Not to compare.
That's true.
Right. So what happens? I don't know if there's people who speak about this, how they get into the KKK and stuff like this. One of the things that happens is they find a kid who's walking by himself, who seems lonely, and they offer him booze at 13 and drugs maybe and women and this 13-year-old and community. Mostly community. Sarah Silverman actually recently talked about this a couple of months ago on her podcast, and also a friend, and she was referring to this guy, Christian Piccolini, who's in Chicago, friendly with him, and he's a reformed KKK member, and he said he was walking around the train tracks, smoking cigarettes, someone pulled up a car, offered him to go to this party. Party was full with booze and girls and community, and the community brought him in, and it wasn't until a Jewish lady told him she doesn't hate him for his swastika tattoos or whatever, that he started thinking for himself. Because we go where community greets us. If we are horrible to people because we disagree with their opinions, they're going to always reject us. I'm just talking about peace. I'm not talking about religion, right? That's what happens. You're going to go to the people who welcome you in. Doesn't matter if it's religion or family or friendship circles. So my belief is that, Jesus would go to the synagogue for community. What he then did there and how he presented himself, that I do not know. I don't have an extensive, I've read certainly portions of the New Testament. I've read portions of the Quran. I don't sit there weekly and read it like I do the Old Testament. So I don't have quite that deep of knowledge of what would happen next. But I think first and foremost, like anyone, we would search for community.
Awesome. So you've had a positive influence on culture, on community. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned on how to make a positive impact where you're at?
So I think the first thing is to create warm and welcoming communities. And also understand that religion is, things that make religion great are difficult conversations, and not change for the sake of change, but change to open our door, and not to bend on religious issues, but to bend on cultural issues that always change. So what we serve for luncheon, how are our doors opened or closed to people when they're trying to walk into the service? What is there for kids to do while the parents maybe are praying or not? What's the ambiance of your lobby? These are huge. And I went to a mega church, not to pray, although I probably would go to it to see what it was like. But I went for this chaplaincy. Minnesota had a chaplaincy program for like a day-long learning, and I became very close with this guy Buddy Wynn, who was a tremendous chaplain in Minnesota, really a wonderful human being, and has a really close relationship with all the faith communities. But he's just what we call a schmoozer, which is someone who can
Good tongue talker.
Yeah, and so so Jews love that. So he fits right in. He presented about chaplaincy in Minnesota at the synagogue, and I went to this thing, and I went to this mega church, and they had a coffee bar in the lobby, and it just felt like a mall. I mean, I was like, where do you pray? I don't it's like, it just felt like a mall. So and it was super amazing, and I was like, why don't we have coffee? I mean, I actually approached some caribou distributors and things like that. Could we, carry them in the synagogue? There's not enough foot traffic for us to do that. But long and short of it is that's number one. How can we be warm and welcoming? The days of stringent and exclusivity are long gone in the Jewish world, and some synagogues don't realize that yet, but they should. So that's a big piece. Number two is that prayer and tradition, when we are in the heat of, I'm a traditionalist when it comes to prayer, and I want to do all of it or more of it. I want to, I actually lean closer towards I'm a conservative rabbi, which sort of means that law is still binding, but it's reviewed. Whereas in Orthodoxy, it's not often reviewed for an update. The system, they're still using DOS, from back in the day. So they're still using the AOL.
They're still using the scrolls.
Yeah, exactly. So how, but what does that Saturday service, which maybe leans on tradition very heavily, or the way we observe the Sabbath or eat dietary laws, what does that have to do with how fun our Hanukkah program is, right? It has nothing to do with how, so why can't our Hanukkah be something that the kids talk about all year round and wait, all year for the next one to happen? No kids at any service, whether it's Islam, Muslims, Jews, or Christian, are super excited about watching their rabbi or pastor preach, right? Or the long hour long, or in Judaism, 2 to 3 hour long service. but they can be really excited about like what the rabbi is going to do next for Hanukkah.
Dude, I don't think Christians can set in a 3-hour service.
No, they can't.
They're like a 1 hour minimum.
So you want to know what's hilarious is that when you have a bar mitzvah, which is the coming of age for Jews, so 13 for men and 13 or 12 for women. When the bar mitzvah starts at 9, the family's there and all their Catholic friends, because Christians show up when services start. Jews show up, we'll come at like 10:30 and we'll make the luncheon. So you always know who's not Jewish simply by when they're showing up. It's hilarious.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I always do a great thing. I always welcome these groups, and especially if like we had tour groups at the last synagogue that came frequently, and they would always come from all over Minnesota. Minnesota is very Lutheran, so a lot of Lutheran groups. And then I would stay and wait with them, and they would have like the best questions, and I was so fun with them. And they would always leave like, our pastor would never like, answer these kinds of questions so honestly and openly. And I think that's what I give. Like, it's my energy, it's my ability to social network, it's my way of opening doors, but also being truthful. Like, there are things that Jews don't do. Like if you come in and eat pork and don't keep kosher, like pig is like one of the, common known things that, I'm never going to be like, that's cool. I'm like, you do what you want. But like, we're not certain, you can't bring it in the synagogue. It's not I'm not coming to your house to look at your fridge. And if I am, I'm probably looking for.
On a side note, the best hot dogs in the world are Hebrew National hot dogs. I'm just saying, they taste the best.
Yeah, people do believe that kosher hot dogs are better. I'm a vegetarian, so I don't have that comparison point. But yes, that is a known thing. We do. Jews do food well. I mean, we are like Italians. We put our heart and soul into food and sauces and all sorts of stuff. So there's nothing better. I mean, medicine for Jews is matzo ball soup. I mean, that's a thing. That's real. It works.
I've never heard of that, but I'm gonna have to look at it.
Yeah.
Matzo ball soup. That sounds good. So tell us what the Great Rambino is.
So the Great Rabbino. So
Rabbino. What did I say? Bambino?
You used an M. There's no M. It's Rabbi N-O. So Rabbino. So, so my other passion in life is sports. And I played sports for, what do I have on my desk right now? I have a picture over here from Minnesota. You can't see it, but I did the opening blessing at the US Bank Stadium, the new Vikings mega stadium. And then all here is all this sports stuff. Anyways, and I have a huge collection of Jewish baseball cards and things like that. So basically, when I was getting married 12, 13 years ago, like many Jewish men, we don't have so much say in what our weddings look like. It's sort of customary to allow, I got to pick the song I walked down to, and then my answer to everything was, sure, great, sounds wonderful. And so I came home that summer. My wife and I, at the time fiance, were living apart. So I came back to Chicago. I was living in New York in rabbinical school, came home, and we, so that I could support her during planning of the wedding and be around, live together for that sort of time, or live in the same city. And I was just sort of bored. And my friends were like, you should start updating us, like who's Jewish in sports, and write like a blog about it. I was like, okay. Like, I had so much free time. I was like working out twice a day. I had like a small internship, and I was like, okay, this is easy. I can post every day. And it started, it's just like a thing I was doing for my friends. And then one morning I woke up and I had 12,000 hits. Back then, that was the only analytics, was how many hits you got on your website, right? And it was because during the Super Bowl, anyone who Googled, is Julian Edelman Jewish, came to my website. We talked about Julian Edelman a little bit. So, and then I was like, oh, maybe I have something here. And I started, and over the last X amount of years, it's been a lot of things. First, it started as a blog, news site, blog. Then it started as Then I turned it into a small company where I was booking Jewish athletes to speaking gigs all over the country. And then I promoted to senior level rabbi job, so I didn't have the same kind of free time to do that. So now I post like once, maybe twice a week, stories, a lot of interviews, and things that I think are a little more pop culture fun, but all in the sports. And so it's a Jewish sports website. It's the longest running. I've gotten to be, we talked about this. I was on the floor of the Final Four covering that story as the confetti was coming down at Dream. I got to cover the Super Bowl. I just covered Team Israel's mini camp out in Scottsdale, which was before the Olympics, which was really cool. And another passion of mine is pro wrestling. And we began putting pro wrestling in the synagogue. And so it's turning into hopefully a company in which I can promote wrestling and other shows.
When you say put it in the synagogue, what does that mean? My mind's
social hall. I mean, if you go to my YouTube page, you'll see the story of Temple of Wrestling. We brought in Scott Steiner. We brought in a lot of Jews, and then we also had some non-Jews, just because.
So literally, you bring wrestling mats and you wrestle in the
whole ring, the whole 9 yards, guardrails. Yeah, it's amazing. And there's a lot of things that came out of it. So first, it was an idea of some of my congregants, and then I made it happen. And we didn't really know what we had on our hands. We just thought it would be one-time fun event. Then on a Wednesday night, we sold out the show. We had kids asking their parents for season tickets to Temple of Wrestling as if it was a weekly event, like the Bulls or the Bears. We were able to raise a little money for the synagogue. We were able to bring a lot of excitement, people in the building on a Wednesday. But the coolest thing, and this speaks to your podcast, it was the best interfaith program I have ever seen. So what happens at interfaith programs? Either it's like a meal where we get together and I share with you kugel and you share with me a dish from your heritage, and then we eat it, and the same 10 people who came last year came this year, right? Or it's a pastor coming to speak at the synagogue about their love for Israel, or a Jewish, a rabbi coming to support the Christian community and teach a little bit about the Old Testament from a Judeo lens, right? They're pretty cookie cutter, and that's my experience. Not to say that they're bad. They're wonderful. They're wonderful and they're important, and they speak to people, and we have to keep doing them. Or we get together and we work at a food shop, a food bank. Again, very, very important. What happened, and Twitter started blowing up about this event, was never been into a synagogue before. Hundreds of people, never met a rabbi before. Some people had never met a Jew before, because you're in Minnesota, it's, there's the Twin Cities, and then there's everywhere else.
Right.
So I realized that those who thought Jews had horns, which is a real thing that people teach and think.
Really?
We're like, where is horn? Of course we don't have horns. It's an insane, ridiculous, horrible.
Are you sure your yarmulke is not covering it up?
I'm positive. We could I used to shave my head in high school. I'm positive. But so
I'm just kidding.
So but the point is, like, it normalized not just religion but Judaism for these people. The Jewish wrestlers were ecstatic about being able to wrestle somewhere they felt like their pride. Jews who had never been to synagogue in 40, 50 years were sitting front row. It was really special. We're going to do it. I'm going to do some shows, I believe, in Chicago. I don't know how Jewish they will be. I know that at least one will be.
Bring that to Tulsa, man.
Tulsa? Yeah, we could. I mean, Tulsa has wrestling for sure. But if you want to do a faith-based wrestling show, let's talk. I'm happy to talk about it, and I know the perfect people to come in and bring it for it.
That would be fun.
Yeah, it's just theater. I mean, it's just theater, but like less boring.
Right.
And not music. I mean, there's music, but not musical in terms of singing.
I definitely would love to have that conversation. On a side note, because we're getting ready to wrap up here, I like to end the show with the same 3 questions. First one being, in terms of negative self-talk, what do you currently struggle with?
I don't know what that means. Negative self-talk. Can you explain
Yeah.
that?
So negative self-talk is like that inner voice in your head that's like tries to put you down, or like, you're not as good as you think you are, or, something that you're negative, that you critique about yourself.
So, it's a good question. I may tend to be a very self-reflective person. I spend a lot of time thinking about every conversation I have. Like will process this for the next couple of hours. Like, did I really answer the question? Right. And nervous about that. And I try to approach this job with humility, but part of being a leader is that you also have to put yourself out there. Well, you don't have to, but my style is to put yourself out there, even though I'm not always comfortable doing it, even though it might seem like I am. I think the self-doubt is, what if I'm wrong about making religion more welcoming and inclusive, and programming's different and bright? Maybe will I lose some of that tradition, and is that really what Judaism is meant to do? Is it just a trick and pony show where I'm trying to use flashy names and ideas to get people to come in and love Judaism? And can it sustain after me, right? So like, I think rabbis, and probably pastors too, in all religions, build systems around their livelihood, their behavior, and their beliefs. But at some point, I'm not the rabbi for that community anymore. Whether I leave, or whether I retire, or whether I die, have I successfully built an infrastructure that is sustainable, not because the rabbi is Jeremy Fine, because the rabbi is a leader for the said community? And I struggle with that sometimes. Are my ideas so big that they're inaccessible to other rabbis to then run?
That's good. What brings you peace?
My children. They are the best. I have two girls, and I'm very blessed and lucky that I have two kids who have their heads out straight. So far, I mean, they're 9 and 6, so I don't know what. My wife and family, we just recently moved back to Chicago. COVID was really difficult for us to live through without family. Inner peace is also some dear friends who can tell me that I'm wrong or challenge. I had this idea that I was going to, even the little things, I had this idea that I was going to change my cell phone number. Moving to Chicago, I wanted a fresh start. Even though I have, by the way, the best, easiest cell phone number to remember. He's like, why would you do that? You just talked yourself into something that's just so stupid. Everyone has your number who you love. Why would you willingly change it, right? And then there's places. My Jewish summer camp that I went to in Eagle River, Wisconsin, several places in Israel, sitting in a synagogue that I have found a lot of peace in, and there's many of those. Those places I long for as a moment in time to just stop and breathe. And truthfully, Shabbat. I need Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Outside of faith and family, what's the best decision you've ever made? Right?
Yeah, that's a lot of my life. When I was a freshman in college, is when I decided I wanted to be a rabbi. I wanted to coach college basketball. I didn't care about as much playing, or I wasn't like someone who thought I was ever going to make the NBA, but I thought I could be a college coach, which I still believe I could have been. And I was coaching high school basketball. I tried out at the team at the University of Illinois. We were one of the best teams in the country, so I did not make it, but I wanted to go to a big school. And I was a freshman. I called my father. I said, I think I want to be a rabbi. He loved the idea. He was not so keen on me being a college basketball coach. And he said, so I was about to transfer to where I would eventually go to rabbinical school I have an undergraduate program. And I also was going to get to play basketball, hopefully at Columbia, which obviously was not as good as Illinois. And I had a tryout with the team. And I decided not to go. because I realized that if I spent my whole life sheltered in just a Jewish environment, an exclusively Jewish environment, that doesn't mean I wasn't very active as a Jewish student on college campus, but a Jewish school where everyone around me was Jewish and the same kind of Jewish, I would never be able to let a new perspective and a new ideas. How would I be able to be a rabbi for everyone, right? And I decided to stay. Right? Sometimes the best decisions and the most meaningful decisions are the decisions you don't make. And that really allowed me to challenge, do I really want to do this? I did end up going to New York for one semester because all my friends were going abroad and I didn't really want to, or study for the MCATs, and I didn't really want to do that. So I started writing screenplays. I started writing plays. I started acting, and I did things to sort of challenge my desires to be a rabbi. And all of that was because I stayed at the University of Illinois, and it was the best decision I didn't make, but made, to stay.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that would probably be it.
Well, Rabbi, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. Where can people follow you?
Rabbi Jeremy Fine on Instagram and Twitter. Probably more active on Twitter, probably more fun on Instagram. And TikTok, I think, is The Great Rabbino. It might be Rabbi Jeremy Fine, but I think it's The Great Rabbino, which is, and then my podcast, which is The Religion of Human Nature, where we take one topic, usually with two guests, sometimes one, and we talk about issues that a lot of people are thinking about. Similar in vein of this, but it's not religious exclusively. I just had Bob Saget on last week, and we talked about parenting. So, talking about parenting with America's dad, Danny Tanner, was quite an awesome experience. So people could check that out. And I've had John Lovitz on, I've had Jamel Hill on, I've had Jen Wiederstrom on, lots of really interesting people. So you can check out the Religion of Human Nature podcast. Well,
I'm going to invite myself onto your podcast because that sounds like a very fun thing to talk about.
Yeah, we could figure out a time. I'm in the middle of a season where I think I'm just doing one-offs with so I just had Nate Ebner on. If you're a Patriots fan, I know you love Julian Edelman, but so I'm doing with some of these bigger names. And then when I go back, when I have the double session, for sure, Evan, I'd love to have you on.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon.